Good morning. How's it going, GSV pioneers? Right, we're excited to be with you here today. Lila and I are paired up for this session because we share a passion for using technology to power education tied to impact. So we are in the right place here at the GSV Pioneer Summit. My name is Jaime Nack. My background is actually in environmental consulting. And I've spent about 15 years working with Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, cities on implementing sustainability initiatives. And about 3 years ago, launched One Drop Interactive to find an ed tech solution to focus on behavior change and educating employees around environmental topics and really capturing data that can reveal environmental savings and cost savings through that education platform. So that's where my passion lies. And Lila here also has made a journey to the edtech space. She shared with me a pretty moving story about taking it back to her roots all the way to Lebanon, and how her path has gone from actually launching educational initiatives back in Lebanon to an impressive 18 years of powerhouse work at Intel through her venture capital experience at Kleiner Perkins, and now today at Coursera. So I'd love for Lila, if you could share with the audience, if you could take us back to Lebanon and what inspired you there. I think it would be interesting for the audience to hear.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Actually, why don't we do this? If you can imagine me as a child in the Midwest, first generation American, child of immigrants from Palestine and Lebanon. And every night, my dad would stay up late, and there'd be the spotlight, much like this one on me, focused on his drafting table, and he'd be drawing these lines, colored pencils and lines everywhere. And every once in a while, Dad would come home, and he'd have these really shiny gold objects. And he would explain, using simple terms instead of his electrical engineering background, how these microchips were actually helping planes fly, they were making cars safer, and they were saving lives because a lot of the work that he did was around pacemakers, heart pacers. And it was a little bit later in my life that I realized, wow, my dad, he grew up poor, he was an orphan by the age of 5. He really basically didn't seem to have a future, except for, he always said the orphanage invested in his education. And so I'm like, how could this poor boy from the mountains of Lebanon end up changing the lives and helping millions to live? So I, of course, wanted to become an electrical engineer. And after graduating, I spent about 10 years at Intel. First with the Pentium processor on the design engineering team. Then I went to Japan and worked on DVD standards for computers, and then helped Intel launch the developer program in Asia. And then at Intel, we earned a sabbatical. So I wanted to go back to Lebanon and say thanks for my dad for giving me this gift of engineering. So I show up after not having been there about 20 years, and power was going out, all sorts of things were happening, and I was told there was no way that I could build a computer lab. But I'm like, oh, but this is going to help the kids get an education so they can have a chance like my dad. And 2 months later, we had a lab up and running. I came back to Intel. A few years later, I got an email. That was a good sign they were using the computer lab. And the kids, I kept in touch with their progress, went back a couple times. And in 2010, after 10 years, I found out that these kids not only had used a computer lab, but had used their technical skills to advance their education and advance their lives. And so based on my experience, I was able to run Intel's education group, chief of staff at Intel, and then recruited away to Kleiner to be an operating partner. And one day in 2011, nearly 5 years ago, it was in October, John Doerr asked me to join this meeting because he's going to meet 2 professors from Stanford. And they're running this interesting experiment on campus where they put machine learning courses online, and 100,000 people took these courses, which in a typical classroom was 400. And we met the professors, and that was Daphne Kohler and Andrew Ng. And that was the start of my journey at Coursera.
And when you joined Coursera, you were technically the first business executive, not a tech executive, not a professor, and you were coming from the venture capital side of things. So how would you say your experience as the business executive impacted the business model or how Coursera developed from that point on.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had spent so much time in a corporate environment, even though it's a very entrepreneurial environment. At Kleiner, I had a chance to see startups struggle and strive and scale, so it had been an exciting journey. So when I came into Coursera, it was about 40 people. And as you pointed out, it was mainly academics and product focus. So I remember one of the first things I did was we did a P&L review. And we had just started monetizing through courses earlier in the year, even though all of our marketing, everything said free online, free online. So we actually noticed that we were seeing some revenue pick up. And through our P&L analysis, we noticed that content was really driving the monetization, the revenue. So we went and looked at labor market data, identified content, and came up with an entire content strategy, and spent the following year really building out our content catalog rather than take whatever universities wanted. But when I look back and say, okay, things like P&L and content strategy and packaging of content and avoiding the overuse of the word free as a value add and rather focus the value on what we're actually delivering, I think probably my biggest contribution was letting the great talent that existed at the company actually do their jobs. I helped give a voice to the business side, to ask the questions, to ask about learners, using my network to help connect people at Coursera to other startups who had been through similar growth pains, even outside of the education sector, just so that we could think more broadly about what we're doing and how we were doing it.
And from the data collection side of things, so I know the title up here says 20 million students and counting. So not only are 20 million folks out there getting this education and learning on that side of things, but you're also collecting data about how they learn, about what they like, about do they like to learn in the morning, in the evening, as a group, as a solo. What are you doing on the data side, and how is that informing how you grow as a business?
An interesting thing about being started by Stanford CS professors from machine learning and AI is that data is pretty much, analysis is inherent in everything we do. And we look at it a lot of ways, as you pointed out, on like the learner behavior and learning, to kind of the back end of how do we help professors take that data and make use of it. And so I think a good example of this is if you can remember when you sat in a classroom and you would listen to the lecture, you would take a quiz, and maybe the professor would notice if a lot of people missed a question and they would say, oh, maybe this question isn't right, or maybe I need to reteach it. Then they'd wait a semester and maybe they'd remember to make the upgrades and changes. What's happening now when you have 250,000 people in a course or 10,000 people in a course, we can start flagging information for professors where we can say, hey, this is an unusually high number of people that don't seem to be progressing past this video or this assignment, or they're not getting this quiz right. You know, here are some tips on what to do. And then the professor can quickly iterate, change the question, change the video, and upload it and see the impact immediately. So one of the, it's taken us some time, but we've developed the tools, the authoring tools, so you don't have to be a CS professor to be able to do this, right? And which is important because with our course catalog of 1,500 courses across, you know, whether it's business, tech, data, this personal growth and development, enrichment learning, et cetera, like we want professors to really own their content and to make the changes that they want. So we're pretty excited about that. And we're also doing some interesting things like around data where we're starting to flag if there is kind of an unconscious bias in the way that professors are teaching that may exclude certain classes of people from, learners from, and participating and engaging. And of course, that's not their intent, but we're able to provide that feedback to them in a way that allows them to make adjustments. So we're addressing this not only from the consumer side of taking the courses, but also the back end of how do we get the pedagogy right in the beginning and help the professors. And what we're seeing is they're taking their learnings and at the university and actually implementing it on campus as well.
Okay. What about how the types of content, so how content's being served and how that might change? So the panel before talked about VR, AR. I'm guessing, just by a show of hands, how many in the audience know who Adnan Syed is? Serial podcast. Yep. Okay, so when Serial came out, no one would have predicted that podcasts would, interest in podcasts where there's no video, there's no visual, it's just you're purely listening to someone telling a good story would skyrocket. And I think what we've seen is that sometimes you could predict that mobile will be the way people will receive content, videos will be the content of desire, but we might not know what's coming down the line. And so with Coursera, what are you thinking in terms of the future content and how that will look like with someone sitting in their home or 250,000 people sitting in their home? How will they interact with the platform? What types of content might we see in the future?
It's interesting because I think so much of our time is still trying to get today right. We've been in this for, the company launched 4 years ago, and it's been really interesting because we went through this phase of first getting content from the universities and having them comfortable with having content online at scale and what this would do for their own business models and their own alignment with their plans. And then we said, well, this is kind of challenging to try to run courses on a semester or quarterly basis when the professors are used to it. So we made a shift to try to make the content available on demand. People do entertainment on demand. Of course, they're going to want to learn people go at different paces. Well, the challenge was as soon as we made all of the structural change, what we realized is on demand meant that people weren't progressing. And so I guess that's not surprising in retrospect because we've been trained for a couple hundred years now on going to class and taking it on a schedule. So we did automated kind of cohorts of classes to help people through. And then we did things like quizzes. Instead of just doing multiple choice, how can you do peer grading if you're writing an assessment if you're writing an assignment for creative writing or for a music course? And so we had to figure out the right algorithm that would ensure fair grading at scale because you're not going to grade 10,000 songs produced at once. So we've been through a lot of these learnings and very focused on, and then 75% of our learners are outside the United States. About a half are from developing economies. So how do you deal with site bandwidth and video or audio? And how do you do text and subtitles for the learners? My point on all of this is it's always way more complicated than you expect when you're doing a startup. And I think all founders and all entrepreneurs will understand that. And so we're really focused on getting the experience right for now. We're paying attention to others, like, as you mentioned, kind of VR, what's happening in VR and AR. But I think our goal is how can we make learning efficient and effective? And we measure effectiveness by basically have we helped you achieve whatever goals you had. So that, I think that we're still early. We're doing a lot of experimentation with the 21 million learners we have on our platform now and the content and how we can just make that content resonate more with the learners that we have.
Okay. And what about, I know with the Pioneer Summit, disruptive technologies and product launches and things like that are something that everyone here is interested in. And probably people would say Coursera is disrupting the education or education delivery market. But I know that it's also been said that you could be disrupting the labor market. But how would you describe that? So how many people here, since Jaime started the quizzing, first of all, how many people here have taken a Coursera class? All right.
Oh, much better than podcasts. Thank you all. One of the things that has happened with Coursera is we originally started off as consumer, and a couple of weeks ago we launched Coursera for Business. And that really evolved because when we started Coursera, everyone was asking, how are you disrupting the education market? And what we've seen is about half of the people coming to our platform are actually coming for some type of career purpose. And we did a survey that was published in Harvard Business Review that said about half the people are coming for career. About 87% saw an outcome, a positive outcome based on their Coursera experience. Now I wish I would have asked those people. I'll ask them offline. And then about a third of them saw a tangible outcome. So they got a promotion, started a new company, or got a new job. So we're pretty excited about that. And if you looked at LinkedIn, we're at the second most cited certificate. What both of those signal to us is we're disrupting the labor market. people are changing jobs here more frequently. Companies are investing in employees who care about their future, especially in the millennials are wanting investment in themselves because they know they're going to have 10, 15 plus jobs throughout their career. So when we launched Coursera for Business, part of the reason for that was we noticed that there was this particular company that had 10,000 people using their work emails to sign in and take Coursera classes. And so we work with companies now, and what we do is we open up our course catalog. We help curate learning paths for them to get the development, reskill, upskill, sometimes entire organizations. And so that's been really exciting. So I do think much of our focus right now, if you're going to transform lives in general, it starts with career.
Okay. I love the LinkedIn certificate stat. So do you think the social share or the peer high fives, likes, those types of things, is that, what percentage, or do you think that helps motivate the learners as well?
When we did some of our learner segmentation, one of the things we found were there are certain domains where people want their certificate because it has currency. A lot of times in the tech field, like you want to show that you have this certain skill. Also for career changers, like if someone only has a business or a technical degree, but they want to show that they have business skills, they want to go into a marketing position, or so we're seeing a lot of that career changer as well. And then on international, like in my home country, there's and a lot of others around the world, the certificate has meaning. So now when you get a certificate, it's not only Coursera, but it has Johns Hopkins brand, Yale, Stanford, and it's a certificate. It may not come with college accreditation in terms of that you took this class on a campus, but what it does count for is companies are starting to recognize that. Companies like Google are putting it in their job descriptions, as well as governments are actually starting to recognize them as well, as you noticed with the First Lady.
Yeah, and that I guess ties back to where we started with back in Lebanon and the orphanage. And if you can empower people through education to get ahead in life, I think that's fantastic. Any final words? I know we're running out of time that you wanted to share in terms of maybe what you're most excited about for the future of Coursera?
Well, actually, I'll take a step away from Coursera and now just say that I think most people here are building something. And I think building, you go through a lot of challenges, and I think that the term of Pioneer Summit is a great title. I had one of my mentors shared a piece of advice for me, which I would like to extend to you, which is, he said, pioneers and pathfinders end up with more arrows in their back than in their front. And he said, stop occasionally, let me pull them out so you can run further and you can run faster. So my guidance to you here during this Pioneer Summit is go find people that can help pull those arrows out so all of us can run further, faster. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you all.